Hello and welcome back to SixSq Classroom. This is episode number 14 from season number 1. This episode will be about storing and registering data as Amazon S3 objects on cloud using Nuvla. So in the previous episodes, you learned how Nuvla can help you to manage your containerized applications at the agent cloud. However, there are types of applications that are dealing one way or the other with the data. So they either producing the data and need to store it somewhere, or they require the data as an input, or actually both. So that is why we introduced a set of data management capabilities into Nuvla. And today I'll explain a couple of elements of the data management that are possible with it. We actually wrote a number of blog posts on data management. They're available on our website. I highly recommend you go in and checking them out. I will leave the link to them in the description to the video. Also, Nuvla Online documentation contains a section on data management. This is where it highlights the fact that the data management implementation in Nuvla is supported by 3 resources: data object, data record, and the dataset. So today we will be talking about the data object. So this data object is implemented by a resource which acts as a proxy for data stored as objects inside of buckets within S3 on any S3 endpoint. The first obvious action with the data object resource is to create it. So here is a 4-step workflow, how this is done. So first of all, user or an application running on behalf of the user needs to create the data object resource itself. So it needs to provide the bucket, the object name, and S3 credential. So this S3 credential is not the actual S3 credential, but a reference to a predefined credential inside of S3 credential inside of the Nuvla. I will show how this is done a bit later. So then, after the data object resource gets created, there are a number of actions that are available on it. One of them is upload action. So by calling this upload action on the data object resource, what is returned is a pre-signed upload URL. So using this upload URL, user or an application can simply, using HTTP client, upload the data object to S3, register it there, and then as a last action, mark the object as ready in Nuvla. So this constitutes the creation of the object. As you can see, there are a number of benefits here for either the user or an application, for example, running on the edge somewhere. This application doesn't need to possess neither credentials, actual credentials of S3, nor needs to have S3 client installed. I will now show you how all this works, but before that, a couple of prerequisites. So we need to tell Nuvla the endpoint of S3 where the objects will be stored. So here I defined already an infrastructure service on Exascale S3 with this endpoint. Also on top of that, we need a credential bound to this endpoint. This is where I already pre-created the Exascale S3 infrastructure service credential, which is pointing to that Exascale S3 infrastructure. So this is all is required as a prerequisite to be able to start storing objects on S3. Now let's go to the API section of the Nuvla platform and see if we actually have already any data objects. So search for them, and yes, indeed we have one. So let's have a look. So the object name is Africa/zebra JPEG. It's stored in the cloud.animals bucket, and the credential that is used is exactly the one that I've created. So let's store a companion to this object on the same cloud. So let's first check that the object exists that we've created before. So yes, it does. Let's go to the console. Here I will be using a Python library, Nuvla API Python library, that simplifies the interaction with the Nuvla API. So first from the library I'm importing the Nuvla API object, the main one that is responsible for the interaction with the API, then a couple of wrapper objects which allow us or simplify actually the authentication with the service, and then the data object S3 itself. After authenticating with the API, so we create an instance of the data object. Then we open the file that we want to store as an object on S3. Then we provide the credential ID. It's exactly the same that is holding the actual credentials of S3. Then we provide the name of the bucket, the path to the object that we want to appear inside of that bucket, the content type, this is a JPEG, and a number of tags. So those tags help us later on to find the object by the metadata. And then on that instance of the data object S3, we call the create method by providing those input parameters. And after the creation, that 4-step workflow, what we get back is stored and registered object ID, which we'll then later can share with other users or use later on by ourselves. So first, let's have a look at the picture that we are planning to store. So this is a picture of our beautiful African lion. And after running this script, as you can see, our object was successfully uploaded to the cloud and registered in Nuvla. Let's check this out. So yes, indeed, we see this object in Nuvla. And what bucket is it is in? It's in bucket cloud animals. So let's go to Exascale and check it as well. And here is our object. So now let's see if filtering works for us on tags. We say tag equals line. We want to see only lines. And indeed we can see this line. Now we want to share this object with other users such that they could download it. But again, we wanted to share this object the way that we don't actually expose users to credentials, and users don't even have to know where the actual object is located. So what we would be providing to the user, who is registered also to the platform, as just an object ID. And now let's share this object with the user whom we want this object to be able to download. So we go to ACLs. This user will be me. Let's give the view permissions on this object to the user. Going back. And now this user will use a similar script, but instead of creation, the workflow will be download the object. As you can see, I'm importing here the same classes. Though on the data object class, instead of create, I'm calling get to file. So this method accepts object ID and the local file name where to store the object. Let's run the script. Voila, the file was downloaded. Let's open it and check. Yes, exactly, it's the same object as it was uploaded. So as you can see, this allowed us, without needing to possess credentials on this computer and by this user, neither this computer and by this user, possessing credentials for the S3, no S3 client was required either. Everything was handled by Nuvla platform. So now let's go and delete this object. Now the object is deleted. Let's check how many objects do we have. We have only one. Let's go to exascale S3 and check there. Yes, indeed, the object was deleted from the cloud as well. This will be it for the demo. Let's recap. So we looked at the data management capabilities of Nuvla, and namely at the data object resources, which are the proxies to the S3 objects on S3 endpoints. And also we looked at the workflows that are possible with them. So the creation, sharing, and deletion. So having those data objects alongside the applications on the same platform opens up a lot of possibilities that we will discuss later on in the next episodes. Thank you very much.